The night was quiet on the edge of the human colony, a small outpost built against the frozen winds of a distant planet. Daniel sat alone inside his cabin, the dim light of a heater casting soft shadows across the walls. The wind outside howled like a living thing, shaking the windows and rattling the door. He had grown used to nights like this, long and silent, broken only by the hum of machines and the sound of his own breath. He was a repair engineer, one of many sent to keep the colony's equipment running in the harsh environment. Most people stayed close to the main settlement, but Daniel liked his solitude. His cabin stood at the far end of the ridge, closer to the wild ice plains than the comfort of the town. He liked the quiet, the freedom, and the way the stars looked brighter when no one else was near. But this night was different. The sound came suddenly. 3 faint knocks on the metal door. Daniel froze, staring at the entrance as though the sound might not be real. No one came out here at night, not with the cold that could kill a man in minutes. He waited, listening, his heart beating faster. Then it came again, a weak, uncertain knock barely strong enough to be heard over the wind. Cautiously, he stood and moved to the door. His hand hovered over the handle, unsure. He thought maybe it was just the storm pushing something against the wall, or a branch torn loose by the wind, but there was no tree for miles. Finally, he pulled the handle and opened the door a crack. A figure stood there, shivering in the snow. It was small, almost childlike in size, but it was not human. Her skin was pale with a faint shimmer, her large dark eyes wide and filled with fear. She wore no protective suit, only thin layers that clung to her like rags. The freezing air poured into the cabin, biting at Daniel's skin, but she did not move until he stepped back. "Please." The voice was weak, trembling, the words broken but understandable. Daniel blinked, stunned. He had seen aliens before, traders and visitors who passed through the colony, but never like this. She looked fragile, lost, and desperate. For a moment he hesitated, unsure of what bringing her inside might mean, but her lips were blue from the cold and her legs shook as if they might give way at any moment. "Come in," he said quickly, pulling the door wider. She stepped forward unsteady, and nearly collapsed on the floor as the warm air closed around her. Daniel shut the door against the storm and rushed to help her. Her skin was ice cold to the touch, and she flinched as though unused to contact. He guided her to a chair near the heater and grabbed a blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders. The girl looked at him with wide eyes as though unsure why he was helping her. Her lips moved, but no words came at first. She sat trembling, holding the blanket tightly, staring at the heat as though she had never seen it before. Daniel crouched in front of her. "You'll be fine. You're safe here." For a long moment she said nothing. Then in halting words she whispered, "You, human, help?" He gave a small smile. "Yes, I'm human and I'm helping." "You knocked," I opened. "That's how it works." Her eyes softened, but confusion lingered. As silence stretched, Daniel found himself studying her. She was young, though not a child, and her features were delicate but strange. Lines and shapes not quite human, but beautiful in their own way. Her hair was thin and silvery, catching the light of the heater. She looked tired, hungry, and very much alone. He brought her a cup of heated water, the closest thing to comfort he could offer in this lonely place. She took it in both hands, staring at the steam rising, then sipped carefully. A small sound escaped her lips like a sigh of relief. Daniel sat across from her, trying to understand. "What are you doing out there?" "It's dangerous. You'd freeze in minutes." She lowered the cup slowly, her fingers shaking. "I'd run." The word was heavy, spoken with effort. She looked toward the door, fear flashing in her eyes. "Bad people." "Chase, alone." Daniel felt a knot tighten in his chest. Whoever she was, wherever she had come from, she was clearly in trouble. But why had she come here to his cabin at the edge of nowhere? Did she choose him at random, or had she been searching for someone who might listen? The girl pulled the blanket tighter and bowed her head. For the first time since he opened the door, she seemed smaller, fragile in a way that stirred something deep inside him. She was not just an alien. She was a living being, scared and cold, with no one else to turn to. Daniel leaned back, staring at the flickering heater. He had not asked for company, nor for danger. Yet when she had knocked, his hand had opened the door without hesitation. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was simply human. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, warmth grew. The alien girl, once trembling and silent, slowly lifted her gaze to meet his. For the first time, there was a spark of hope in her dark eyes, and Daniel realized that his life, once quiet and ordinary, had just changed forever. The storm passed slowly through the night, leaving behind silence heavy enough to feel like another presence in the room. Daniel sat by the heater, his eyes often drifting toward the alien girl wrapped in his blanket. She had fallen asleep at last, curled up like someone who had not known safety for a long time. For a while, he simply watched her breathe, unsure what to do next. His training as an engineer had never prepared him for this. Helping strangers was one thing, but helping an alien on the run from unknown enemies was another. Yet he could not push her out. Something deep in him, something human, refused to let her face the cold again. When morning light touched the window, she stirred, blinking at her surroundings as if uncertain she was still alive. Daniel offered her more water and a piece of bread from his supplies. She accepted cautiously, sniffing the bread before taking a small bite. The way she ate, slow, careful, as if she expected it to vanish, made Daniel's chest tighten. "You're safe here," he told her again, speaking slowly so she could understand. "No one will hurt you." Her eyes studied him with quiet intensity as though weighing his words against her past. At last she whispered, "Human. Kind." He gave a faint smile. "Not all humans, maybe. But some of us try." The girl tilted her head, the silver strands of her hair catching the light. Why help me?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, struggling for an answer. "Because you knocked. Because you needed it. Isn't that enough?" She was silent for a long time. Then, in a voice soft but certain, she said, "My people, not same kindness. Weakness, no one. Help." The words sank into Daniel like stones. He could hear the loneliness behind them, the weight of a life where compassion was a rare or forbidden thing. He wondered what kind of society could create someone so young yet so familiar with fear. Later, when the sun rose higher, she stood and walked toward the window. She touched the glass as though the brightness outside was strange to her. Daniel watched carefully. She seemed calmer now, but every sudden sound made her shoulders tighten. She was like a bird ready to flee at any moment. He decided to ask, "Who are you running from?" Her body stiffened. She turned slowly, her eyes filled with something sharp, fear mixed with memory. "Soldiers," she said. "They take me back. If find me, I die." Daniel's hands curled into fists. He had expected danger, but hearing her say it so plainly made the reality heavy. "Why, what did you do?" She hesitated. Her lips trembled as though part of her wanted to remain silent. Then she whispered, "I not belong. I know things. Secret." She shook her head quickly as if afraid to say more. "They not want me free?" Daniel felt a chill unrelated to the cold air outside. Whoever these soldiers were, they were powerful enough to make this girl flee across the frozen plains with nothing but thin clothes and desperation. And if they came here, to his cabin, he would be trapped in their game whether he wanted it or not. Still, when he looked at her small frame and frightened eyes, he knew he could not send her away. "We'll figure it out," he said firmly. "If they come, we'll find a way." Her gaze softened and she lowered her head as if the weight on her shoulders had eased slightly. "You, strange, human, strange, you help even if danger." Daniel chuckled quietly. "That's us. Strange, stubborn, and sometimes too foolish to know when to stop." For the first time, a faint smile touched her lips. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there. The rest of the day passed slowly. Daniel showed her how to use some of his tools, handing her a small piece of equipment to keep her occupied. She touched each item with careful curiosity, as though she had never seen such simple machines before. When he explained their purpose, her eyes lit with interest. Despite her fear, she was quick to learn, asking broken but eager questions. In those hours, Daniel began to see her less as a stranger and more as someone caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was not just a refugee. She was young, intelligent, and quietly strong. But that evening, as the sun began to sink behind the frozen ridge, Daniel stepped outside to check the energy lines. He paused, scanning the horizon. For a moment he thought he saw faint lights moving in the distance, far too straight and steady to be natural. His stomach tightened. It was too soon to be sure, but something told him the soldiers she feared might already be searching. When he returned inside, she looked up at him quickly, sensing the change in his expression. "They coming?" she asked. Daniel forced calm into his voice. "Not yet, but maybe soon. We'll be ready." Her hands trembled slightly around the blanket, but her eyes did not lie. Ave his. For the first time, trust shone in them fully. She believed him. She believed a single human, with nothing but a small cabin and stubborn will, could protect her from the shadow chasing her. Daniel sat near the heater once more, his mind racing with questions he could not yet ask. Who was she, really? What secrets did she carry? And how far would he have to go to keep her safe? As darkness fell again and the wind rose outside, Daniel realized that whatever path lay ahead, he was no longer alone. The knock on his door had changed everything. The second night was colder than the first. Daniel kept the heater on high, though he worried about using too much power. The alien girl, still wrapped in his blanket, sat near the warmth with wide eyes fixed on the door as if expecting it to open at any moment. She had slept a little, but fear kept her from resting deeply. Daniel tried to distract her by talking. He told her about the colony, about how humans had come to this frozen planet to mine resources, and about how machines kept them alive in such a hostile place. She listened carefully, though sometimes she struggled to understand his words. Still, she asked questions in her broken speech, and he answered patiently. The small exchanges slowly built a fragile comfort between them, but outside the wind carried strange sounds. More than once, Daniel thought he heard something moving against the storm, low hums that did not belong to the weather. He knew the girl had heard it too because her body tensed each time. On the third day, Daniel went out to check the solar panels on the ridge. From there, he had a wide view of the horizon. He froze when he spotted distant lights, steady beams moving in a slow pattern, searching. They were too controlled to be natural. His stomach sank. The girl's pursuers were here. He returned quickly to the cabin, trying not to show his alarm. But she noticed the tension in his movements. They close? She asked, her voice small but steady. Daniel nodded. Yes, I think they're looking. Fear flashed in her eyes, but then something else replaced it. Acceptance, as if she had expected this moment. She drew the blanket tighter around herself and whispered, If they find me, you danger. Daniel crouched in front of her, meeting her gaze. I knew that the moment I opened the door, but I don't regret it. Her lips parted as if she wanted to argue, but no words came. Instead, her eyes softened and she lowered her head. That night, Daniel did not sleep. He stayed near the window, watching the darkness. The girl sat quietly behind him, her small frame hidden in shadow. The cabin felt smaller than ever, as if the storm outside was pressing the walls inward. Then near midnight, a faint glow appeared in the distance. Daniel grabbed his binoculars and looked. Shapes moved across the ice, tall figures in dark suits, their steps heavy and deliberate. Soldiers. They carried lights and devices that swept across the snow. They were hunting. Daniel's pulse quickened. He closed the blinds quickly and turned to the girl. They're coming. She stood, fear plain on her face. We must hide. They not stop, Daniel thought fast. His cabin had no basement, no real hiding place. But there was a storage shed dug into the ridge, built low and half buried in snow. It was small, but it could shield them from sight if they were careful. Come with me, he whispered, grabbing his thick coat. He handed her his spare, though it was too big for her frame. She pulled it on, her hands disappearing inside the sleeves. The storm had calmed, which made their escape harder. Every sound of their boots crunched loudly on the snow. Daniel led her carefully, crouching low, his breath clouding the air. The shed was not far, but every step felt heavy with danger. Halfway there, Daniel heard the distant whine of an engine. He pulled her down behind a snowdrift just as a beam of light swept across the ridge. His heart pounded as the soldiers' voices carried faintly through the night. They were speaking in a language he did not understand, but their intent was clear. They were searching carefully, leaving nothing unchecked. The girl pressed close to him, trembling, her breath warm against his arm. For a moment, Daniel thought they might be discovered. But the light passed and the voices faded. Slowly, he urged her forward again. At last, they reached the shed. Daniel pulled the door open and guided her inside. The space smelled of metal and cold air. He closed the door behind them, plunging the small room into darkness. They sat together in silence, listening to the faint sounds of the patrol outside. Minutes stretched into hours. The soldiers moved closer, their boots crunching on snow above them. Daniel held his breath, his arm around the girl as though to shield her from sight even here. The shed's thin walls did little to block sound, and every noise made his chest tighten. Finally, the footsteps began to fade. The patrol was moving farther away, At least for now. Daniel let out a slow breath, his muscles aching from the tension. The girl leaned her head against his shoulder, whispering so softly he almost didn't hear. "White, you stay? You could. Leave me." Daniel shook his head. "I couldn't. That's not what humans do. At least not the kind I want to be." For a long time she was silent. Then in a voice fragile but certain she said, "You different, not weak, strong in way they not know." Her words lingered in the dark, carrying more weight than she knew. Daniel realized she was beginning to see humanity in a new way, not as cold, not as selfish, but as something else entirely. As the night dragged on and the storm outside returned to mask the sounds of pursuit, Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The soldiers would not stop. They would search again and again, but now he was sure of one thing: he would not let them take her. And somewhere deep inside, he sensed that his choice to protect her would change more than just his own fate. The shed was dark and cold, but it was safer than the open ground. Daniel and the alien girl sat close together, waiting in silence. Hours passed and the sound of soldiers faded into the storm. At last, Daniel dared to open the door a crack. Snow blew inside, carried by the wind, but the night was empty. He helped her stand. "We can't stay here," he whispered. "They'll search again. We need a plan." Her eyes lifted to his, uncertain but trusting. "Where go?" Daniel looked out across the frozen plains. The main colony was too far, and bringing her there would only draw attention. The soldiers would search every settlement sooner or later. The only chance was to move deeper into the ridges where caves cut into the stone and ice might offer shelter. "We go east," he said finally. "There are old survey tunnels. They're abandoned, but they'll hide us." The girl nodded, though her body trembled. She was tired, weaker than she wanted to admit. But she followed as Daniel led the way into the night. The wind cut at them, sharp as blades, but Daniel kept moving. He broke the trail in the snow, shielding her as best he could. She stumbled once, nearly falling, and he caught her arm. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with exhaustion. "Why so far?" she asked. "Because safety isn't easy," he answered, his breath fogging the air. "But we'll make it." For hours they walked, the frozen world stretching endlessly around them. The silence was broken only by the howl of the storm and the crunch of their boots. Daniel's muscles ached, but he forced himself to keep going. Each time he glanced back, the girl was still there, fighting to stay on her feet. At last, the black shape of stone rose from the snow ahead. The entrance to an old tunnel, half buried in ice, appeared like a mouth opening in the cliff. Daniel hurried forward, pulling the heavy door until it creaked open. Inside was darkness, but at least it was dry and shielded from the wind. They stepped inside, closing the door behind them. The air was still and cold, but compared to the storm, it felt like safety. Daniel lit a small lamp, casting dim light over the narrow walls. Rusted metal supports lined the passage, remnants of old human work. The girl sank to the ground, pulling the blanket tight around her. Her breathing was uneven, and Daniel could see how much the journey had drained her. He gave her another cup of warm water and some food. She ate slowly, as though each bite was both comfort and burden. "You're strong," Daniel said quietly. "Most people wouldn't have made it this far." She shook her head. "Not strong, only afraid." He sat down beside her, leaning against the wall. "Fear doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Her eyes studied him, reflecting the lamp's light. "But I not human," Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe not by blood. But you feel, you hope, you fight to survive. That's close enough." For a moment she said nothing. Then her voice softened. "You teach me." Different way to see. The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. In that quiet space, Daniel realized how much she had already begun to change. She was no longer just a frightened stranger at his door. She was someone learning, someone searching for meaning, and he was part of that journey. But their peace did not last long. A low vibration passed through the tunnel, faint but unmistakable. Daniel tensed, holding his breath. The sound grew louder, the steady rhythm of engines. He hurried to the entrance, peeking through a crack in the door. His chest tightened. Lights moved again across the snow, more soldiers searching closer than before. Their machines hummed low, scanning the ridges. He returned to the girl, lowering his voice. "They're near. We have to stay hidden." Her eyes widened. "They never stop." "Always find." Daniel shook his head firmly. "Not this time. Not if we're careful." They retreated deeper into the tunnel, moving quietly between rusted beams. The air grew colder, but darkness covered them. They stopped only when the sound of soldiers outside became clearer, echoing faintly against the walls. Daniel crouched beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. She was trembling again, but she didn't look away. Her voice shook when she whispered, "Why risk? You owe me nothing." Daniel met her gaze, steady and sure. "Because you knocked. Because you needed help. That's enough for me." Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. Instead, she whispered back, "Then, I not alone." The soldiers passed above, their voices sharp and mechanical. Daniel held his breath until the sound faded once more into the storm. Only then did he let out a long, quiet sigh. The girl leaned closer, her head resting lightly against his arm. For the first time, she did not seem ready to flee at any sound. Trust had taken root, fragile but real. As the lamp flickered, Daniel stared into the darkness ahead of them. The tunnels stretched far, twisting into unknown paths. He did not know where they would lead, or how long the soldiers would hunt. But one truth had settled deep in his heart. He would not abandon her. The universe could send storms, soldiers, and endless dangers, but he would face them all. Because sometimes humanity's greatest strength was not power or weapons. It was the choice to care when no one else would. And in that cold, empty world, Daniel knew that choice was already changing them both. The tunnels were silent, except for the faint drip of water falling somewhere deep inside the stone. Daniel and the girl rested by the dim light of the small lamp, both listening for any sound that did not belong. The storm outside had faded, but the danger had not. Daniel knew the soldiers would not give up. The girl sat close, the blanket wrapped tightly around her, her large dark eyes reflecting the glow of the lamp. For a long time she said nothing, as if she was fighting an inner battle. Then she spoke softly, her words broken but filled with meaning. "You want truth?" Daniel looked at her carefully. He nodded. "Yes, I think I need to know." Her hands trembled as she held the edge of the blanket. "I not only run away, I carry secret, dangerous." Daniel's chest tightened. He had guessed as much, but hearing her say it made the air heavier. What kind of secret? She took a long breath as if gathering strength. "My people, soldiers, rulers, they control everything. No one free. All must obey, but I find something. Hidden knowledge. Something they fear." Daniel leaned forward. "What is it?" Her eyes lowered, her voice almost a whisper. "They build weapon. Big, terrible. Can destroy not only humans, but many worlds. A steel part. Not weapon itself, but code. Without me, they cannot finish." The weight of her words hit Daniel like ice. He stared at her, his mind racing. She wasn't just a refugee. She was the key to something far larger. If what she said was true, then the soldiers were not simply chasing a runaway. They were hunting the only thing standing between them and destruction. "Why did you come here?" he asked quietly. She met his gaze, her eyes filled with fear but also hope. "Because humans, different. We hear stories. You fight, but also protect. I think maybe. Human help." Daniel sat back, stunned. He had always thought of himself as ordinary. Just one man keeping machines alive at the edge of nowhere. But now he realized the choice he had made at his door was bigger than he imagined. He wasn't just protecting a girl. He was protecting knowledge that could decide the fate of worlds. He rubbed his face, trying to think. "If that's true, then you're in more danger than I thought." "And so am I," her voice shook. "If they take me, they finish weapon. No one's safe." Daniel felt a fire rising inside him. Fear, yes, but also determination. "Then we can't let them take you. Not ever." For the first time, she reached out, her hand brushing his arm. It was a small touch, hesitant and unsure, but filled with trust. "You believe me?" Daniel nodded firmly. "Yes, I believe you." The silence after that felt different. Not empty, but heavy with meaning. They were no longer two strangers hiding from the storm. They were partners now, tied together by something greater than themselves. Hours passed, and Daniel began to make a plan. He studied the tunnels, searching for paths that could lead them deeper into the ridges. If they could stay ahead of the soldiers, maybe they could reach the communication tower miles away. From there, he could send a warning to the colony, maybe even to the wider human fleet. Humanity needed to know what danger was coming. But as he thought, he noticed the girl watching him, her eyes full of questions. "White guy risk all this?" "You could leave me." Live safe, Daniel gave a tired smile. Safe isn't real if you watch others suffer. If I let them take you, then I'd lose the part of me that matters most. She tilted her head, trying to understand his meaning. Then slowly she nodded. Humans, strange. But maybe, strong in heart. Daniel chuckled softly. That's one way to put it. As they rested, the sound of engines echoed faintly again through the tunnel walls. The soldiers were still searching. Daniel stood, checking the small supplies he carried. We can't stay here long, he said. We move when it's dark again. The longer we wait, the closer they get. The girl rose, pulling the blanket tighter. Though her body trembled, there was strength in her eyes now. Not the strength of someone who had lived without fear, but the strength of someone learning to stand despite it. When the lamp flickered, Daniel packed it away. Darkness filled the tunnel, broken only by the faint glow of snow seeping through cracks above. He placed his hand lightly on her shoulder, guiding her forward. Step by step they moved deeper into the unknown. The girl's voice broke the silence once more. If we fail, if they take me, you must destroy code, promise. Daniel stopped, staring at her in the faint light. No, I'm not letting them take you. And I'm not letting you die for this. Her eyes searched his, filled with quiet desperation. Promise, she whispered again. Daniel clenched his jaw. He couldn't give her that promise because he refused to accept it. Instead, he said, I promise I'll protect you. That's the only promise I'm making. Her lips curved in the faintest smile, tired but grateful. As they continued deeper into the tunnels, Daniel realized there was no turning back. The secret she carried was too great, the danger too real, but so was the bond forming between them. The knock on his door had begun with a single choice of kindness. Now it was a fight for more than survival. It was a fight for the future. The tunnels twisted and turned, dark and cold, as Daniel led the alien girl deeper into the ridge. Every step echoed faintly against stone walls, but the sound seemed to belong to the earth itself rather than their footsteps. Outside, the distant hum of soldiers' machines reminded him that time was slipping away. They could not stay hidden forever. The girl's small hands clutched the blanket tightly around her, though she no longer trembled as much. Daniel had seen fear, exhaustion, and now something new, determination. She was learning that running alone would not save her. Together they could survive, maybe even fight back. Daniel stopped at a narrow junction in the tunnel, listening carefully. The faint clatter of metal reached them from above. Soldiers were close again, moving systematically. He crouched low and whispered, We need to split the path. If they find one, the other can escape. You follow the left, I'll take the right. Her large eyes widened, disbelief and worry mixing in her gaze. Alone? He shook his head. Not alone. You're strong. You can do this. I'll meet you further down. Just trust me. She hesitated, then nodded. For the first time, she moved forward without fear, disappearing into the left passage while Daniel took the right. The tunnel swallowed them both into darkness, separated but not defeated. Daniel moved quickly but carefully, using every instinct he had learned from working in harsh conditions. The soldiers were methodical, but they relied on technology, not human intuition. Daniel used the shadows, the turns, and the echoes to mask his steps. He paused once, listening. The girl's passage echoed faintly from the left, confirming she was moving as he had instructed. When he reached a wider chamber, he paused to catch his breath. The faint glow from his small lamp revealed old machinery abandoned decades ago. Broken consoles and rusted equipment lined the walls. He could use them as cover if needed. Above, a metallic clang echoed, and he froze. The soldiers were near the junction. He ducked behind a console, holding his breath. The sound of boots passed just feet away, and then silence returned. Daniel exhaled slowly. Meanwhile, the girl moved steadily along her path. She had learned from watching Daniel. She avoided noises, stepping carefully, sometimes using the walls to guide her. When she reached a small alcove, she paused to rest, her chest heaving. She had come far, but the weight of the secret she carried and the fear of the soldiers made every step heavy. She glanced at the blanket Daniel had given her and hugged it tighter. His presence was not with her now, but she felt the memory of his words, his promises guiding her. I will protect you, he had said. Those words gave her strength enough to move forward despite fear. Hours seemed to pass as both navigated the maze of tunnels. The soldiers continued their search, their lights scanning every corner, their voices sharp. But Daniel and the girl moved like shadows, human cunning and alien instinct combining to stay unseen. Finally, Daniel saw the faint glow of a wider exit ahead, an old maintenance shaft leading closer to the surface. He paused, listening. The girl's echo reached him again, confirming she was nearby. He whispered to himself, "Almost there. Almost safe." The soldiers' voices grew louder behind him, impatient now. They were close to discovering his path. He clenched his fists, feeling the pressure and responsibility pressing down. He could not let them take her. Not now, not ever. At the same time, the girl reached a similar exit. She peeked through the opening and saw the ridge stretching toward a distant communication tower, faint lights marking its location. She smiled faintly, the first genuine smile since the chase began. She moved carefully, guided by the memory of Daniel's instructions. Then a shout echoed from below. One of the soldiers had noticed a movement near the tunnel. Panic rose in her chest, but she focused. She adjusted her path slightly, moving faster yet quieter, determination driving her forward. Daniel, hearing the alarm, increased his pace. The soldiers were gaining, but he used the final twists of the tunnels to his advantage. He burst out onto the ridge just as the girl appeared from the opposite exit. They met without words, a brief glance enough to confirm they were together again. For a moment they stood side by side, catching their breath. The frozen wind bit at their faces, but the danger had not yet passed. Ahead, the communication tower glowed faintly, a symbol of hope and survival. Daniel looked at her and nodded. "We're close. Almost there." She returned the nod, her eyes bright. She was tired, scared, but no longer alone. Together they began the final stretch, moving swiftly toward the tower, knowing that whatever waited ahead, they had survived the tunnels, the hunt, and the fear. And in that moment, Daniel understood fully that humanity's strength was not only in courage or tools, but in the choice to protect, to endure, and to stand together. That choice had carried them this far, and it would carry them all the way. The communication tower stood like a lone sentinel against the icy horizon, its faint lights cutting through the early morning mist. Daniel and the alien girl reached it, both breathing heavily, their bodies exhausted but hearts pounding with relief. The storm had cleared, leaving the world quiet except for the soft crunch of snow beneath their boots. They climbed the final steps to the tower, careful with each movement. Daniel's mind raced. Once they reached the top, he could send a signal to the colony, alerting humans to the secret she carried. If they acted quickly, maybe the soldiers could be stopped before completing their plan. The girl followed silently, her large dark eyes fixed on him. She had changed in the days they had fled together. Her fear was still there, but it had been joined by something stronger, hope. She moved with purpose, learning from Daniel, trusting his judgment and finding courage she had never known she possessed. At the tower's control panel, Daniel quickly activated the equipment. Lights flickered and a low hum filled the room. He checked the transmission settings and began sending a detailed message, coordinates of the tunnels, a description of the soldiers, and warnings about the secret she carried. Every keystroke carried weight, every second mattered. The girl watched him, her hands folded tightly. Finally, she whispered, "You trust humans?" Daniel glanced at her, eyes steady. "I trust the ones who choose to do right. That's all any of us can do." Her lips curved in the faintest smile. "Then, I trust you." The message was sent, a signal racing across space toward the colony. Daniel let out a long breath, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. But there was no time to rest. They still had to escape the ridge before the soldiers discovered their location. Outside, the wind carried the faint hum of engines. The soldiers were moving, and it was only a matter of time before they realized the fugitives had reached the tower. Daniel grabbed the girl's hand. "We move fast. Stay close and don't look back." They ran across the ridge, the cold biting at their faces, the snow slipping beneath their feet. The soldiers' lights glowed in the distance, but Daniel and the girl moved like shadows, silent and determined. Every step was a test of endurance, every breath a small victory. At the edge of the ridge, a narrow crevice offered cover. They slipped inside, crouching low as the soldiers' searchlights swept over the snow above. Daniel could hear the faint shouts and commands, but the soldiers had not seen them. For the first time in days, he allowed himself a small smile. They were safe for now. The girl looked at him, her eyes reflecting gratitude, fear, and relief all at once. "You saved me," she said softly. Daniel shook his head. "We saved each other. You taught me patience, courage, and trust. I just helped you see it." For the first time she laughed softly, a sound like the faint tinkling of wind chimes. It was light, almost fragile, but it carried a sense of freedom she had never known. They moved further into the crevice, finding a path that led them down toward lower ridges and finally toward a hidden human outpost. Daniel knew that once they reached safety, the alien girl's story would change everything. Humans would see that even in the cold, distant reaches of the galaxy, compassion could make a difference. As they traveled, the girl spoke more freely, telling Daniel small details about her people, about what she had witnessed and about the secret she carried. He listened patiently, offering advice and encouragement, but mostly offering the kind of trust she had never received before. Hours passed, and at last the outpost came into view, lights glowing warmly against the icy landscape. Daniel led the girl inside and she looked around with wonder. Humans were bustling with routine, unaware of the danger they had just narrowly escaped, but safe now for the first time in days. Daniel turned to her, his eyes soft. "You're safe here. No one will hurt you." She nodded, holding the blanket around her shoulders. "Not alone anymore," she said. Daniel smiled, thinking about the journey from the moment she had knocked on his door. One choice of kindness had set everything in motion. One human had opened a door, and it had changed 2 lives and perhaps more forever. Outside, the icy wind blew across the ridges, but inside the outpost, warmth filled the space. The girl's eyes shone with trust, and Daniel felt a quiet pride. Humanity had shown its strength not through weapons or power, but through compassion, courage, and the willingness to stand for someone in need. For the alien girl, the galaxy had shifted. For Daniel, the ordinary man who had simply chosen to help, the universe had changed him. They had survived storms, soldiers, and fear together, and now they had found something stronger: hope. As dawn broke, casting pale light over the outpost, Daniel and the girl looked toward the horizon. The stars above still shone cold and distant, but beneath them a bond of trust and courage had been forged. One act of kindness had become the spark of a story that would be remembered far beyond the frozen ridges. A story of humanity's warmth in a galaxy that too often seemed indifferent. And in that quiet, hopeful moment, both understood something simple yet profound. Even in the darkest and coldest places, humanity could shine.